Hi, everybody. Welcome again to another episode of the ShopNotes Podcast, back from our summer hiatus. My name's Phil Huber. I'm your host, joined by the usual cast of suspects, John and Logan, and a special guest today, John Henry. Want to thank our sponsor for today's episode, Shaper Tools. They're the makers of the Shaper Origin. It's that handheld CNC router that brings digital precision to the craft of woodworking. Tackle joinery, cabinetry, hardware installation, and more with speed and precision. Try it risk-free in your shop for 30 days. Visit shapertools.com to learn more. All right, Logan, since you brought company today, you get to introduce him.
I brought company like 3 days ago. But yeah, so we have John Henry here from Pantorouter. John Henry's been up here the last couple of days with myself, filming some videos on the Pantorouter, building a Pantorouter cart. So, John Henry, do you kind of want to give us a little bit of, or give everybody kind of a rundown of your woodworking background and kind of how you came to be with Pantorouter?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me today. So I have been at Pantorouter about a little over 5 years now.
Sure.
I started woodworking full-time about 6 years ago. I was previously a cook and just working in restaurants, and started falling in love with Japanese knives, which is a natural progression when you're using a knife all day. I think there's a lot of crossover there in the woodworking world, and started making wood sheaths for knives. And coworkers would ask if I could maybe make them one, and it sort of spiraled out of control. And as far as just becoming obsessed with woodworking, I grew up around it a bit, but kind of just fell into it. And I was buying a router table fence off of Craigslist, and rolled up to Mac's house, who's the owner of Pantorouter. And I was trying to stay busy as a self-employed person, and said, if you ever need any help around here, let me know. And, flash forward, we're still working together
still doing it. That's awesome. Well, and we will include a link to John Henry's website. He does some fantastic work.
Thank you.
So people can take a look at your stuff. So yeah, no, I met John Henry and Mac when we were out in Portland a couple of months ago. I was out there for a photo shoot with Billy Sandry, and we've done a little bit of work with Pantorouter. And I know everybody that's listened to the podcast, we've talked about it before, about how I love the Pantorouter. Like, I didn't want to. And it's funny, John Henry and I were at dinner last night. We were at dinner last night, and we were talking about pellet grills, okay? Like Traeger pellet grill. And John Henry, being in the culinary world, was doing a trade show for Traeger. And he's like, I didn't really want to like it. It's like one of those gadgets. I'm like, that's how I felt about the Pantorouter. Like, it's another one. It was another one of those woodworking gadgets. I'm like, no, dang it. I like it.
Because I believe there's a podcast back in our archives where we discuss not wanting to like the Pantorouter. And that was before you got one in. So
yeah, it was like tools you love to hate or something.
Yeah. Or hate to love.
Yeah. Hate to love.
Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe that's probably what it was.
I'm hopeful that you hate to love it rather than love to hate it.
That's right. That's right.
Right. So what kind of reception do you get when you're presenting the Pantorouter? I mean, because I feel like we live in a very polarized world, so everything is polarizing. But, like we have a guy on staff here who's really into CNC stuff, which is voodoo woodworking, apparently.
Mm-hmm.
So do you get like a mixed reaction, or?
It's definitely a mixed reaction. I think there's some healthy skepticism around a new tool that claims to save you time in your shop. I think we've all probably purchased accessories or some sort of tool that we thought would just be, a huge time saver and frankly just collects dust, somewhere in the corner. So some people are very skeptical of, will it actually do what it claims and, save me time in my shop? But a lot of people see it and they kind of just have immediate kind of amazement and then a little bit of anger around how fast a tenon was cut. And seeing how they used to do that either on the table saw or bandsaw by hand. There's obviously a ton of different methods that you can employ for that, but shop time is such a premium, whether it's something you're doing in your free time or if you're doing it as a profession. And we're not eliminating these really romantic moments of hand cutting joinery at the bench. That's still always an option, but often it's really just setup time on different tools that we're kind of cutting down rather than trying to set up your table saw for a very specific operation. You can just cut the joints pretty quickly using the Pantorouter.
Yeah, well, and I think it's funny because I was asked, probably 2 months ago to do a demo of the Pantorouter for the Des Moines Woodworkers Club. And the way that this whole thing kind of evolved was rather odd because Chuck Haas, who's the president of the Des Moines Woodworkers, he bought a Pantorouter from Mac probably 6 years ago. And he never set it up. And the Des Moines Woodworkers often meet at Chuck's personal shop to do projects and classes and whatever. So he's like, I want this set up to be able to use. He's like, here's the deal. He's like, I know you like it. He's read, the Pop Wood reviews I've done of it and stuff. He's like, I know you like it. I know you know how to use it. Can you come out and give us a demo? And I mean, give us a demo, wink, wink, but also help me set it up. Basically is what it boiled down to.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, sure, no problem. So I met him out at the Woodsmith store on a Saturday morning and gave him a demo. And, it's a smaller group of guys because it was their furniture maker group. So there's maybe 25, 30 guys there. The guys that are really interested in furniture, so kind of that traditional Mortise and tenon type joinery, dovetails, stuff like that. And, I don't know, start to finish, if you walk up to the Pantorouter with two parts, you can have a Mortise and tenon cut in 4 minutes, maybe.
Oh yeah,
not long. But I'm doing my demo, talking to these guys. So it takes me 10, 15 minutes. But when I put the joint together and I pull it apart, and they hear that that suction pop when it comes apart, they're like, "Are you freaking kidding me?" just looking at everybody's faces, it's like. Now I get why people are magicians, because the look of shock and awe on people's faces was awesome.
Yeah, I think we, really struggle with the kind of Swiss Army effect, where when it says that it does, dovetails and box joints and slot mortising and mortise and tenon, the natural reaction is, if it does all these things, it can't possibly do any of them particularly well. And, there's certainly operations that you can do on that machine that would be way faster using other tools or methods in your shop. But there are a good handful and core amount of operations that really are unrivaled, which is pretty fun.
Well, and I think what's kind of fun, and not to say that you couldn't do some of the stuff with other tools, but for example, yesterday, as you and I are filming, we're building a cart for the Pantorouter to sit on and stuff, and we're doing some rabbit joints for the drawers, and we just slap together a simple jig to basically act as an auxiliary fence and table, so you could bury the bit in it halfway and make a rabbit. And it's one of those things that, there's other tools that could have done that, but what that showed me as somebody who has used the Pantorouter, pretty regularly, that you could, the amount of stuff you can do with it, is really limited by what you want to bolt down to the table or how you want to use it. You know what I mean? Like, you can add so many different auxiliary items to it and just absolutely unlock endless possibilities. So
yeah, absolutely. It's
that's what I was kind of amazed with this week too, is watching the mortising 10 inning, but also seeing it used for other uses as well. As you can bolt different things to it, like you said, and it's basically just a router table, flipped on its side as well.
Yeah, Michael Fortune is a big proponent of it, and kind of a mad scientist in the shop sometimes, creating jigs and tools to do what he needs. And he said it best. I mean, he put it very bluntly. He's like, at the end of the day, it's just a nice jig to hold a router in a horizontal position. And what you choose to do with it beyond that is really up to you. And so sometimes you want to leave your router table set up with a very particular setup, and you might need to do a couple rabbits really quick, or just having that extra tool in your arsenal and knowing that you can do all these different operations is pretty handy.
I feel like it's kind of interesting because we've talked about on the show before about tools that are multitaskers and tools that are unitaskers. And sometimes you need a unitasking tool because it just does its job extremely well. Mm-hmm. And there are multitasking tools, like you said earlier, John Henry, that do none of them particularly gracefully, or it's almost forced.
Yeah.
And I think there's something to be said for, looking at the tools like the Pantorouter, where instead of trying to look at it as a Swiss Army knife kind of tool, instead it's just basically a joinery machine.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then that allows you to free up your table saw. Like, you can do a bunch of joinery on the table saw, but in the course of a project, that's going to turn you mostly into a NASCAR pit crew where you're constantly, switching out blades and setups and dado blades and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. And raise your hand if you've gotten through cutting parts to size, set up for joinery, and you realize, crap, I need 2 more styles. And it's
exactly.
Now what?
Yeah.
Well, I was going to say, it's funny because we were, I was showing John Henry a picture of the table that David Marks and I were working on 3 weeks ago, and how it's a round top. It has 3 dados in the edges to hold the legs. And I was kind of bouncing ideas off of him. Like, I know I could do this on the Pantorouter. Like, how would you do it? And we were talking through, how I would do it, because David Marks has one of the original JDS multi-routers, which is a similar form. They're definitely different, but it's a similar form, just with a few more levers and a little bit clunkier in some areas, in my opinion. But that's what David said. He's like, I would, if it was me, I'd just bolt it down on the table and zip up and down and make the dados that way. And John Henry and I were talking, and it's like, oh, you know what? You could just set up the box joint template on the template holder, clamp down that round table. You'd have to use your front stops as 2 registration points and draw a center line for your dado. But then you're just going up and down with the box joint template. So, it's one of those things that, and clearly this episode is not sponsored by Pantorouter. But I truly like it, and I've said it. I think I've said it enough that people understand that.
Well, it's definitely appreciated.
But yeah, it's pretty cool.
It's definitely one of those things. Regardless of whatever tool you get in your shop, you kind of familiarize yourself with it, and over time, when you're trying to problem solve a tricky joint or an operation you haven't done, your brain kind of goes through like, okay, where can I do that? Can I do that on the bandsaw or router table, or do I need to make a custom jig? And it's just kind of one more option to say, I think I could probably do a setup there and hold it down safely and make really clean cuts.
Well, and I think the one thing that's exciting to me, or the most exciting to me about the Pantorouter, is that as I'm starting to not necessarily build more complex projects, but starting to look at projects outside my norm, which is a lot of, standard traditional shaker style furniture. I'm starting to look at doing other types of projects that involve a much more complex set of joinery. The Pantorouter really makes a lot of that stuff more approachable. Very much the same way that a domino for some people makes complex joinery much more
100%.
approachable. It's like you said, John Henry. It's all about what you have and how you use it. And certain tools will get you to a certain point faster than others. Talking about doing tenons on compound angles and slot mortises in weird crazy parts, or doing tenons and curve parts. So weird stuff like that. That is just, in my opinion. I think I'm going to end up doing quite a bit more of that in the future, and I think this is probably going to help immensely. So I'm pretty excited.
To boil it down, though, or separate it specifically from the Pantorouter, it's kind of like there are folk in woodworking, and we've of all stripes, and there are some that just have a bunch of tools, and they're more or less owned by the tools, in the sense that they don't really understand what's going on. They can functionally use a lot of tools, but until you take, the Pantorouter, or for me, like the router table, and invest in it and spend some time practicing with it and choosing to master it, is when you own that tool.
Yeah. Instead of the tool owning you.
Yeah, because then you get to understand what this thing is capable of. That it becomes a problem-solving thing.
Absolutely.
That.
Yeah, I think it's great to just kind of design or enter that project design phase with the mentality of I'm not thinking about the joinery first. I'm thinking about what I want this thing to look like, and what this overall piece is. And then it's a fun problem solving game of, okay, now how do I get those two to meet at a compound angle? Or, that's, to me, the fun part of furniture making and furniture design, is just sort of creating a tricky problem for myself, and then trying to dig myself out. And so, like you're saying, that's just a really nice way to put it, that you really have to invest the time in any tool to be able to trust it to sort of bail you out of a tough situation.
Yeah. I just want to point out that John Henry says that like a true furniture designer. Design first. Screw the joinery. We'll figure that out down the road.
Yeah. I don't know how this is going to work.
No, it's funny because
fake it till you make it, right?
Yeah. Well, no, it's like we have those. Not we have those discussions, but sometimes our builders are like, they'll be working on a project in the shop, and they'll be like, "What was the designer thinking? Like, seriously, I gotta get this together like this. Like, yeah, in the computer it goes together just fine, but as I'm trying to cut it, it's not going together how it's supposed to." So,
no, I think there's like projects where you can say, I really want to learn X, Y, or Z, or a specific kind of, joinery, and sort of pursue that project as a means of an education. And then I also think, especially in kind of the commission world, where someone is saying, I'm hiring you to make a furniture piece that really I can't find what I'm looking for out in the world, because it's not going to be cheaper to hire someone to make it. So that kind of problem solving is like, oh, it's got to fit in this weird nook in my house, or I have a strange book collection and they're all really tall and I need this specific shelf. Like figuring out all these problems that you have to fix, I think is the thing that keeps it interesting and pretty fun.
That's funny, Logan, that you bring up that kind of give and take between the designers and builders here, because there's a lot of times when I'm building or designing something on the computer and I'm like, oh, that's a really complicated joinery or way to assemble this, and like it's easy to do in the computer, but how am I going to do this? And then I think, oh wait, I don't have to do it. That's Mark or Steve's problem. They can figure it out, and then they can tell me how they did it. And so, but yeah.
See, and And me, from like a Neanderthal standpoint, I'm like, give me simple joinery first, design follows.
I will definitely talk myself out of certain designs on the computer, just knowing that I'm going to have to actually build it.
That's funny.
Well, see, that's because what I was wondering for John Doyle, because you've had it from both sides, John, where you're designing the project to hand off to a project builder, but then, you know, when we build projects for the TV show, you're on the flip side of that, having to go through. And I know that there's been projects where it's been like, what the heck were we thinking on doing it this way? And then we just flip it around and it's like, oh, see, we can do it this way, and it's a little easier.
Yeah, I've been on both sides, and I mean, truly building other people's designs has like forced me to learn new ways, I guess, and get out of kind of the typical way of thinking and the way I do things. So it's helped me learn a lot. But yeah, we get to this point, it's like, I'm not going to do it that way. I'm going to do it my way. So.
Well, it's funny because there is points where we're building stuff on the TV show, right? Like we'll be the three of us will be on set putting together a project for the TV show, and we'll all be standing around the bench looking at a set of plans like, why the hell was it put together like this? And then it's like, we could do this, it'd be so much more simple. And then we get to that point and we're like, that's why.
Right.
Now we got to figure out how to fix what we just screwed up. So,
Today's episode is brought to you by Shaper Tools. They're the makers of the Shaper Origin, the handheld CNC router that brings digital precision to the craft of woodworking. You can tackle joinery, cabinetry, hardware installation, and more with speed and precision. You could try it risk-free in your shop for 30 days. Visit shapertools.com to learn more.
John Henry, you're getting ready to move into a new shop, right?
I am, yeah. I'm going to be moving into a new shop, hopefully next month or two here. And
cool.
Yeah, daunting task when things weigh hundreds or over 1,000 pounds, but
That's awesome.
Finagle it in there somehow.
But it is fun, right? Like, as somebody who is in the process of building a shop, like, it's fun to think about. Like, even if are you downsizing shops a little bit?
It's actually technically a little bit more square footage.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah, there's a like we talked about a bit, there's a wood stove in there, and a small kind of toilet bathroom area. So when you kind of factor in the area that those eat up, it's roughly the same, a little bit bigger.
Okay.
But
well,
under 1,000 square feet.
Yeah, so, and like even moving spaces from like a bigger shop to a smaller shop, just the whole like starting over and washing your hands of your current shop, and that ability to change something that you didn't like in your current shop, I think is exciting. So, and you're out in the Pacific Northwest, right? Mm-hmm. So, what are you most looking forward to in your new shop and least looking forward to in your new shop?
Yeah, I think it is a good opportunity to kind of rethink what you have been doing and what your layout has been, and what's effective. It's really easy to kind of fall into this pattern and say like, well, my joiner's always been there, so I'm just going to put it here. And it's amazing how even roughly a 24 by 36 layout was my old shop, and now this is a roughly 31-foot square. And just that change of shape really does totally change what kind of layout is feasible and comfortable. So I'm excited to kind of, my father is an architect, and he, from a very young age, I remember him making physical models. And so that was my first step, was just like get some foam core and start moving some things around. Cause I drew it all up in the computer too, but it's just, there's nothing like actually seeing stuff to scale in front of you. And so I'm looking forward to just kind of really finalizing that tool layout, so that I don't have to move them 20 times. And the thing I'm least looking forward to is probably the physical moving of probably getting my bandsaw out of the old shop. It's a gravel entrance
Sure.
and has a big lip on it, about 12 inches off the ground. So getting that hefty thing out of there is going to be a fun challenge.
Rent skid loader for the day.
Yeah, really.
That's why John has the little bandsaw.
That's right. Just strap it on my back. It's like a backpack
Bench
bandsaw.
top.
There you go. I'm a sucker for a deal. I'll inconvenience myself heavily in the moving process if I can find a good deal somewhere. So sometimes I'm my own worst enemy in that front.
Well, that'll be cool. It's fun to. It's a lot of work to move a shop, but I think it's fun kind of getting that new, fresh, like, hey, I'm kind of starting over, but not really starting over. I'm starting over and making it better.
Yeah. I think this is shop number 5 now. And
oh, cool.
It's progressed from, a dusty basement to some really fun spaces. One point in time, we were in a big kind of industrial warehouse. A bunch of folks were renting spaces within that warehouse, and then there's large communal tools as well. And the person who managed that, essentially, very nice guy, but maybe not the best business acumen. And he said, I'd love to give you guys a month's notice, but I think in a month I'm going to be bankrupt. So if everyone could just move out in 10 days, that would be really great. And
awesome.
It was this mad dash of, 15 woodworkers and steel workers and all these people all packing up their stuff and, dodging each other and trying to get in the loading dock. And so the fact that I don't have to do it in 10 days, I'm just, I'm counting my blessings there.
Yeah. So being in the Pacific Northwest, I'm a wood nerd. I think everybody here knows that. What's your favorite local woods from the Portland area to work with?
To work with, I really do love madrone. It's a beautiful wood if you can find big enough boards that aren't super squirrely and checked, then it can be a really it machines beautifully. I think it's really nice. It has a subtle look to it, but it's clearly not a species that people are often familiar with. And
sure.
The Oregon, Washington area is really known for its black walnut. A lot of it is actually exported around the country and around the world, and not a whole lot of it stays in the state. But our pretty wet winters and then dry summers create these really interesting growing patterns, and the grain and color of the Oregon black walnut is just pretty striking. So that's always fun when I can talk a client into going for the fun stuff and the pricey stuff.
Yeah. Do you ever Phil is our resident vegan woodworker, and by that I mean he likes to use softwoods. Mm-hmm. So do you ever do anything with fir or Alaskan yellow or redwood? I know you guys don't get much redwood up that far north, but
yeah, we don't get a ton of redwood. I love working with Doug fir, especially my boss Mac recently found through kind of a word of mouth, a friend of a friend. This guy was an arborist for years, and he was moving, and he found this tree that came down in the 70s, but based on the size and the rings, it was grown before Columbus hit the shores of America, and it was 5+ feet around. This beautiful old growth fir that had some sort of lightning strike or major damage to it, and so the bottom section was still standing. They took that down in the 70s, and he milled that up beautifully and stickered it perfectly. And it's been sitting in his barn, and this guy kind of has been just hoarding wood as we all do for decades, and decided, I'm going to sell my walnut stash and move to Costa Rica. And that was his thing. And he got rid of his fur, and just the tightness of the grain and how beautifully it works, even, sitting for that long, all milled up. It's it's a pleasure to work with. I tried to pick the ugliest board the other day to do a door jamb for a shipping container for our storage for Pantorouter. And it's like, as soon as that came off the joiner, I was like, oh my God, I thought this was going to be the worst board. And this is like incredible. I almost don't want to use it for this. It's too nice. So
yeah, I remember Mac telling me. Yeah, I remember Mac telling me that he's like, I just went and got all this fur, like full trailer full. I was like, you're a butthead, because our fur here comes in 2x4 form, and it is it's not even new growth. It's like premature growth. Like it's nasty. So
yeah, I mean, we have we grow a lot of fur in Oregon, just to for the lumber industry, and I think it's a very fast growing tree, and so as a slightly more renewable resource compared to something like steel, where you're just mining it out of the earth and that's kind of it. It's great that we can kind of continue to plant and harvest that. But when you look at those two species of that old growth fir and some of the stuff, even though maybe technically it's the same species, it's two different woods to work with completely. And it's really a pleasure to get the opportunity.
Yeah.
So speaking of shops, Logan, do you have any updates on your space?
I'm still waiting for my builder. So I contacted, I think I don't know if we've podcasted since I got my building pad done. My building pad is done. So it's like all laid out, graded, ready to start building on, and it looks way bigger now that it is graded and sitting there. But I reached out to my builder and said, hey, building pad's done, just check and see your timing. And because originally he wanted to start in July, which would be like, in July. And
we're in July.
Yep. He said, it's going to be a little bit later. The really wet spring we had, he said, push a lot of stuff back a bit. So I'll give it another week before I poke him again. So
he said July, just not which July.
Yes, he did not say July 2022 or 23. I really want to be in the shop before winter. That's my biggest thing. I would really like to.
Yeah, because if you're moving tools in winter, I'm busy that day.
I know. Right? Luckily, I have the tractor, and I can just reach in the sliding glass door in the basement, lift up stuff, and drive it in the new sliding glass door and drop it. But yeah, I guess the bigger thing is I don't really want to be like doing framing and insulation during the winter, and it just sounds miserable.
Yeah, miserable.
Yep. Plus, I have a lot of concrete I want to pour. I mean, the shop's getting concreted, but while I have a concrete truck there, I'm going to do a patio in the back. So it's like, I would really like all that done before it starts to freeze.
Right.
So,
what is the cutoff here? How late can you pour?
Sometimes, yes, all year. Sometimes it's like October.
Oh, wow.
I would say probably mid to late November is probably our
cutoff. Yeah.
They will pour everything during freezing temperatures. They mix calcium carbonate in it, I think. And they'll throw curing blankets on it, like heated blankets. I've always been told, and I don't know if this is just an old man superstition, but concrete poured in the freezing temperatures is not as good as concrete that's been allowed to cure.
Gets kind of sketchy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, and with a 40 by 88 foot concrete slab, I really don't want a lot of movement because I'm gonna have cracks all over. You know what I mean? Like, so I'd rather not do that. But
I made the mistake of trying to use my semi-freshly poured area as a staging area for a couple of tools, and there is so much moisture that comes off of that initially. And I was like, it was a couple weeks ago, it's fine, but that thing is curing for a while, and nothing too bad as far as rust, but it was definitely a good reminder that there's quite a bit of water that's got to come out of there at some point.
Yeah, well, and it's funny because I've been trying to decide what to do with the floor. It's like, do I leave it concrete? Do I epoxy it? Do I do like a low pile carpet? You know what I mean? Like, do I do something like that in the shop? Or I think kind of what I'm leaning towards is doing like sleepers on top of the concrete with a hardwood floor. Because I think that unfinished hardwood floor would be a really nice, photography floor. It would be nice to work on, that type of thing. So I don't know. We'll see. And I have a ton of Baroque that I could mill into flooring. So,
Are you putting foam under your slab?
Yes.
Or
there will be foam under the slab. So,
because I just know that in my garage shop in winter, that slab just basically turns into a life-sucking disaster because it's super cold. You have that floor on the back end of your shop, right? Like that has to help a bit. That made a huge difference when I put that OSB and then the like dimpled plastic. Just that little bit of separation makes it so much better in there. But
yeah, the comfort for standing on is pretty nice to have that, but also the temperature, like you're saying, you notice that when you're standing on an ice cube all day. It's painful. I'm having the same kind of debate right now of flooring. I had plywood subfloor in my last shop, and this one's concrete. And do I want to kind of replicate that? The one thing I did realize was moving tools around. If they're heavy, maybe the Baroque will be better, but they'll leave, a trail of indentation in the plywood. It's
that's true,
point loading that much weight on plywood. It'll leave it. So that was one of those things where it's like, well, they are mobile, but I probably shouldn't move them too much.
Probably shouldn't move them.
But
all right. I think that wraps up another episode of the Shop Notes podcast. We'll post some links to John Henry's work as well as Pantorouter on our show notes page. You can check that out at woodsmith.com/podcasts. If you have any questions, comments, or smart remarks, I'd love to hear them. You can email them to us at woodsmith@woodsmith.com or leave them in the comments section on our YouTube channel where you can see our special Brady Bunch edition with all four of us on this episode. Otherwise, we'll see you again next week, everybody, for the Shop Notes podcast. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
This episode of the Shop Notes podcast is brought to you by Shaper Tools. They're the makers of that handheld CNC router. I'm sure you've seen it. It's called the Shaper Origin. You can do all kinds of stuff with it. Cabinetry, hardware installation, joinery, all with speed and precision. It really adds some digital precision to your woodworking. Right now, there's a special risk-free offer. You can try it in your shop for 30 days. If you'd like to learn more about that, just check out shapertools.com.